But if you understand your archetypes and your personal archetypal patterns, you can recognize why you make the choices you do, how to expand and break, for example, the addict pattern. Hi, everybody. I am delighted today to introduce a weekly little mini seminars that I'm going to be doing on the power of archetypes. I decided to do this because actually the family at CMED decided that we should do this as a kind of gift to all of you once a week. But I have my personal reasons for wanting to do this, which I'm going to share with you now. I believe that we're going through such an extraordinary time of transformation that, and transformation is something that is just so complex to describe, but in a sense, I'm going to sum it up my way, and that's this. I've come to believe that we are essentially creatures of power. Power is the fundamental ingredient of the human experience. That we are beings of power encased in a physical form. And that we spend our lives seeking to understand our power, seeking empowerment, seeking to understand the nature of ourselves. And I think this is the crux of what consciousness is all about. And that this quest for empowerment is universal, making it itself an archetypal pattern of a cosmic nature. Now, what I want to do in these weekly messages to you, it's going to follow a format. And that's that the first thing I'm going to do is to explore an archetype, a particular archetype. It could be from, healer to networker to addict to warrior to judge, whatever. Each week I'll pick a different archetype. And then I'm going to apply it to your personal life, a individual life. Because an archetypal pattern, which I'll define in a minute, is so vast and so rich and so multi-layered, it's impossible to describe it or apply it to everybody's life the same way. But I'll do my best to make it general, specific enough that you can relate to it. Like, for example, everyone can relate to the child archetype in some way. For some people, they may relate more to the wounded child or the abandoned child. For some, it might be the nature child or the magical child. But everyone has a child archetype. That is universal. And so as I describe that archetype, I am speaking to all of you in some way, though I may not necessarily describe the exact way, the exact archetype, the child archetype that you have, but I'll do my best. So I'm going to do the individual. And then what I'm going to do is take an archetypal pattern and apply it as best as I can to what is happening in the world around us. Because one of the laws of the universe is that what is in one is in the whole. And so all of the teachings, everything you want to understand about your power, follows the laws. And that's the laws of creation, the mystical laws, the laws of science. We are all subject to that. Now, an archetype is a universal pattern of power, and that pattern governs all of us. So one way I've come to think about it, in fact, the main way I think about it, is that this universe is nothing but power. that is always in creative motion, always creating, always creating, always creating. And it is the nature of God. That is the divine. This vast, huge, endless, who knows where it ends? It doesn't end, it can't end. It just is a constant breath of creation. And it is impossible for us to comprehend this vast creativeness and to comprehend the multi-layers of this creative power, the multi-layers of what this power can do, what its potential is. We didn't know, for example, decades ago about nuclear power, and now we know about that realm, and who knows what's beyond that and what's beyond that. So we are explorers in this dimension of power, constantly exploring the nature of power. And every time we make a quantum leap from candles to electricity to nuclear, we discover and have to rediscover how we work, how we function, how we understand the nature of our power. And so if you look back in the last decades, this quantum leap we have made into the invisible world of power, technology, satellites, computers, cell phones, understanding all of that. We now speak of our consciousness. We have entered the age of energy, and there's no going back. It's just going forward and going inward. And I think that if when you look at the vastness of space, you see a photograph that's sometimes sent back from these telescopes out there. I think the vastness of our inner space is as extraordinary as what we see in the outer space. And that our potential in creation is so vast. And so what I think the universe did was design a system through which we can understand the nature of power gradually, like from candles to electricity to nuclear. We didn't get it all at once, because that's not how human consciousness has to evolve in stages. We simply we ascend, we grasp the vastness of the universe in stages. And as we do, we shift by understanding what we are capable of. And so as we entered the nuclear age, well, we didn't say, well, now that we're in the nuclear age, let's take a look at what we could think of as our inner nuclear power, our consciousness. We didn't do that, but that's what we did. We didn't articulate it that way, but that's indeed what we did. And so you look back, and this movement started to seek out our personal power, self-esteem, self-empowerment, power classes. We became obsessed, focused, driven by understanding inner power, because that's the next stage of our own empowerment. And so that exploded into this understanding of a different understanding of how our health works, that power is a fundamental ingredient. It is the fundamental ingredient in life. And that every one of our thoughts is in fact a power unit, that our attitudes have power, our beliefs have power, and that power expresses itself in our biology. Our biography is our biology. That there isn't any power exchange we have that doesn't have a physical correlate, that doesn't somehow manifest in our body. Our anatomy, our power anatomy, as I wrote about 25 years ago now, is structured in power from the chakras and the types of power that are magnetized in in layers, so that our emotional power is on a very different frequency than our warrior power, which is more in the second chakra. We are just a system of power. And as the years went by with readings, and I became more and more fascinated, not in understanding what made you ill and etc., but I realized that the way I was looking at it was so limited, so like, well, this makes you ill and this gets you better, that it was primal. That and here's the metaphor I want you to consider, and I tell all my students that, and I'll be referring to it as our year goes by together. And that's the building. I always refer to the building. And think about this: when you're born, you are a building. Think of yourself as a building, and that building is boom. It's built where it is. So I was born in Chicago, and boom, I was born in the Midwest. I was born into a Catholic family. There are certain things in me that designed me, my two parents, etc., my siblings, that are part of my building structure. And the belief patterns that were put into me as I was educated in a Catholic system, and also my wonderful family, my wonderful extended family, and all the rituals we had. But this is like the first floor of your building, your life history. It's the first floor. Now, from the time we're born and we are a building, we can't move our building. I can, obviously travel. I can myself go anywhere, but I take my building with. I am my building. And from that point on, the only movement I actually really have is to constantly move up the floors of my building. I can't change my building. I can't change the day I was born. I can't change who I am. I can't change my parents. I can't change the structure I came in. My only power is to rise to different floors in my building. And if you go into a building, you'll notice, like, go into a high rise, every floor you go up, you see a different vista of the same address you're standing in. And as you expand your vista, you have to include in your vista everything you're seeing. And this actually happened to me. And I tell this story all the time. And I was visiting a friend in New York, and it was a hot day in August, and the smells of the street were up, and it was so hot, and it was, loud, and the taxi cabs are, honking the horns. And I walked into her building, and she happened to live on the top floor, and she had a little balcony. And so I sat on the balcony, and I just felt this incredible sense of relief as I was no longer bumping into people on the ground floor. But then I noticed, as I was sitting there sipping an iced tea, and the sun's going down and the lights of the city are going on, what an unbelievably beautiful city. And I saw the Hudson River. And it occurred to me that if I were only on the first floor and I never got off the first floor, that if someone said, you live near Central Park and there's the river and there's this and there's that, I could say that wasn't true. It's not the truth, but it simultaneously, for me, on the first floor, wasn't true. Because the truth is, the building is near Central Park and the Hudson River. And you can see this vastness from this building. But if I only stayed on the first floor of myself, of this building, I would never see that. So you have to go to the second floor, and you see a little bit more. And then you go to the third. Well, this is what consciousness is about. As you ascend in your thinking, you have to leave behind a lot of baggage on all the previous floors. And you expand your vista. You begin to include people you didn't know existed, cultures you didn't know, histories you didn't know, all kinds of understandings of how the cosmos works. You get to a floor and you think, I don't think Catholicism is the only religion in the world. I think I'll leave that here on the third floor and see what else there is. And you go up and you start looking at Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. You start looking at Judaism, all the other religions. And you think, I wonder what they have in common as I look out upon all of that. And then I decide what it would look like if they weren't religions, but I just grasped their mystical traditions. The next floor, where in fact I took the jewels and not the religion, not the politics, just the truth of each of these religions. And you go up floor by floor by floor. Now, there are tools to doing this. And with every floor you go, you leave behind the way you thought the world was. And you open yourself to, I wonder what it's really like. Not unlike going from the age of electricity to the nuclear age. If we said to someone in 1930, I can hit a button on a computer, a word they wouldn't even know, and send a message out to millions of people, just like that. I don't need a stamp. I don't need a letter. This one-on-one stuff is done. It's just, in fact, I don't even use letters anymore. They could never comprehend that. Never. If we said, I take my phone with me, you have a wall phone, but me, I have a little bitty phone. It goes with me, and in fact, it's a computer. And I can Google whatever I want to know in a moment. You have an encyclopedia. Me, I have Google. It's incomprehensible. Could they go up to the next floor and even begin to grapple with the fact that there would come a time when we would go to the moon and then beyond, and even consider putting a station on the moon permanently, and that we would be able to have nuclear medicine, that we would, the things that we could do today that we think are so terrific, but they're nothing. We're going to continue. We're going to continue. Would they ever think that there would come a time when the world would be in a climate catastrophe? They wouldn't even think of it. Then who thought about climate change? Whoever thought that there would be a global water shortage? None of this that would have, they wouldn't have had the foresight. Foresight is part of our soul's capacity to imagine, not make up, but to image, to allow images of what is being created through our choices to come into our consciousness. Now, what I've learned is that we are driven to empowerment because power is what runs us. And and part of the way we are able to understand our power is in units, and those units are archetypes, archetypal patterns, that we each have certain archetypal patterns that govern and direct us, that influence us. We all have the child. You can relate to the child. Here's another archetype you can relate to, and that's the vampire. It is very common for someone to say a person has vampiric energy, and I don't want to be around that person. But I'm going to explain something to you about that. You have so much power, and while power is vast, we have so much power every moment to expend, to utilize, to run our life, Consciousness is learning how to make choices that do not deplete us, that do not drain that energy, that do not drive us without consciousness. For example, an addiction drives us without consciousness. I have to have that drug. I have to have that drink. Consciousness, it controls and it depletes. You hemorrhage, your energy hemorrhages. You have to replace that energy. You have to utilize that energy. You have to. And so people find ways to, and one way to compare this is that you're given $100 worth of energy a day. If you use $90 on that, pursuing an addiction, for example, the addict archetype, you're gonna go into energetic debt. And so when you go into energetic debt, you have to find ways to get more energy. And here comes the vampire archetype. You will siphon it from other people. You'll become a complainer. You'll become depressed. You'll find ways to incorporate the support of others. But what you're really doing is siphoning their energy because you're unable to generate it yourself because of the choices you make. And I want to explain all of this in depth through archetypes. But if you understand your archetypes and your personal archetypal patterns, you can recognize why you make the choices you do, how to expand and break, for example, the addict pattern. How to break that. That's the brilliance of Bill Wilson's work with Alcoholics Anonymous. It showed a way to, you'll always have that pattern, but it doesn't have to control you. So I am going to explore patterns of power. And the way I believe the universe works is that each of us has a limited number of very intimate patterns while being connected to everything. But we have this limited number of patterns that are unique to us with unique expressions through us. So that the universe is two things: impersonal and very intimate. Patterns of power are very impersonal, and yet when we have those patterns of power, they're very intimate. And so, women who are mothers, a mother is a universal archetype. It wasn't created for you. You're not the only mother in the world, and yet your experience of that archetype is deeply intimate. So that's what I want to do. And I also want to, I want to explain something else about the nature of the divine and how it's woven into these patterns. Instead of thinking of this off-planet God, which is just, I want you to think of a higher floor in the building where you can begin to shed the long-running myths of many religions that have anthropomorphized the nature of God in order to encapsulate cosmic power, and begin to grapple with maybe the nature of God is more universal, more impersonal, and yet very intimate. Maybe the nature of God is law, constancy, like, for example, Phoenix rising from the ashes. Because in all of our lives, we have the experience of falling into the ashes and having to start anew. It is universal. But because it's a law, rising from the ashes is guaranteed. Some means will come to you to help you rise from the ashes. It is not about whether or not you sacrifice or do this or that, but it is a guaranteed cycle, and that's the nature of God. a guaranteed cycle. Where prayer comes in is that your capacity, what floor that cycle operates on, how consciously it operates, how much grace pours into it, that's where choice comes in. But the cycle will operate nonetheless. Nonetheless. Now, my next session is going to be on the archetypal structure of personal empowerment. I think I need to lay that groundwork out before I nosedive into an individual archetypes. I want to talk about another archetypal pattern that is the pattern of our progression through power, and the stages of that, because we're all moving through those stages, and how consciousness brings us, these stages of power bring us into the cosmos. Although you can stop the stage, but it's really intriguing because we're all on this path. So I hope you'll enjoy these. I'm